guys, welcome back to my channel. This is just gonna be a little video because I hit my reading goal. Actually, I hit it at the beginning of October, but it's taken me a while to like get everything together and plan this and start really actually working on my YouTube channel. And then I was like, I want to do this video because I'm so proud of myself. So it's basically just I hit my reading goal on storygraph, which was only 25 books. Compared to a lot of people on YouTube, it feels like such a small goal and a like, oh, that is nothing. But I think that it's really important to acknowledge like small wins, and that just hitting a goal at all is amazing. Reading books at all is amazing, and to not compare yourself to other people, especially people who have been doing this for a lot longer or who YouTube is their full-time job or whatever. 25 books starting. The first one is in January and the last one was, I think I finished it like October 4th-ish. So, okay, I'm gonna start with the first one, which I actually just unhauled and don't feel like going to get it out of the box. Because if I take it out of that box, who knows if it's gonna get back in and end up getting donated anytime soon. So yeah, is Plain Bad Heroines by Emily M. Danforth. This is it's I believe Emily M. Danforth's first like adult novel. I know she wrote The Miseducation of Cameron Post, which I loved, and maybe another young adult book, but she's a lesbian and all of her stuff is gay, which is amazing. So this is a story that kind of has two timelines. The first timeline, the story kind of starts, the whole setup is in 1902 at this all-girls private school in Rhode Island, Brockham School for Girls, and it follows these two girls who they get obsessed with this memoir by this other young woman named Mary MacLean. And then they're like in love with each other and they start this Plain Bad Heroines society and it's this whole thing. And then in the second timeline, the like modern day is about three 20-somethings, Merritt, Harper, and Audrey. And Merritt wrote a book about this whole story, and it's getting turned into a movie starring, I think, the other two, and they're all sapphic in some way. I don't know if it's as clear about like who is a lesbian versus who is bisexual, but who the fuck cares? They kiss girls. Love it. But yeah, and it is kind of following their story of like the movie, and like all this kind of weird stuff starts happening and you're like, what is real, what is fake, is there a haunting, it's all this kind of stuff. It's a really, really great setup, and I love like the main timeline. I think I gave it 3 stars because it just, the flashbacks weren't hitting, but I know some people who feel the exact opposite way. Like some people loved the flashbacks and some people hated the original timeline. I felt kind of the opposite. So then in May, I entered my Bridgerton era because in April, season 2 came out. I hadn't watched season 1, but like these people, Jonathan Bailey and Simone Ashley, like I am too bisexual for that. Like I had to watch it. So I watched it, immediately became obsessed, bought their book, the special copy with the actors on the cover, beautiful people. The Viscount Who Loved Me by Quinn. I actually skipped the first book, but I own it and I'm planning on reading it soon. It's on my TBR, hopefully by the end of the year. But I didn't really care for the romance in season 1, so I didn't see the point in reading it. So yeah, I started with Viscount Who Loved Me, which I believe I gave 4 stars. Yeah, I just checked, 4 stars, which is maybe being a little generous, but I just love them. And it feels like, I know a lot of people who read the books first were like mad about the show, but I just felt like the show really added to their story. Actually loved it. It felt almost like some like deleted scenes. There's some bits about like Kate, especially. She gets a bit more in this. I understand people who have problems with some of her backstory being cut. And the show really only gives male characters flashbacks, not gonna get into it. Gonna do a whole big video on all the Bridgerton books before the season and just talk about all of them. So this is just gonna be talking about this and then quickly overview of the other ones. And book 3, An Offer from a Gentleman, gave 3.5 stars, but I'm actually now thinking about dropping it down to 3 because the longer I sit with it, the less I like it, but I love Sophie Bennett. Then Romancing Mr. Bridgerton, which is actually the one they're doing this upcoming season, even though it's book 4. Don't know why, not my business. But yeah, this one is great. This one is probably almost a 4-star. But yeah, this is Colin Penelope's story, so. Then book 5 is To Sir Philip with Love. This is Eloise's story. I think, yeah, I like probably both of these about equal, which I know is an unpopular opinion, but I just found this one interesting. It's a slightly different trope than the others, so yeah, I gave this one, yeah, a 3.75, which is also what I gave this one. Then, and the best one, 5 stars, When He Was Wicked, Francesca's story. Oh my god. Oh my god. Like, so steamy, throws every trope you thought these books were gonna be full of out the window. Like, amazing. Michael Sterling, I love you. It's friends to lovers. It is magnificent. 5 stars. Read this one. And then 6 is On the Way to the Wedding. And 7 is It's in His Kiss. This is Gregory's and Hyacinth's. I think it's actually Hyacinth's first. I get confused because he's older than her, but this, yeah. And this one I hate because it's tiny. But yeah, great. Both 4 stars. Love them. Hilarious. This one has a little, I'll get into it in that longer video. This one has a little like questionable elements. This one is perfect, and I headcanon the love interest as neurodivergent, which I love to do. There's also, Julia Quinn has also written a Bridgerton prequel series, which is basically, Anthony is the Viscount, and his father, Edmund, was also the Viscount. That's how it works, you know that. So yeah, his father was the Viscount, Edmund, and there's like, his generation is in the prequel books, and they live most of their time in Kent at Aubrey Hall, and they live right next door to the Earl of Manston, I believe is how you say his name, which is the Rokesby family. Again, just guessing on the pronunciation of that. So it's a whole little quartet, 4 stories following the like Rokesby family and their interactions with the Bridgertons. Sometimes they marry a Bridgerton, and yeah, in 3 out of 4 it's like a Bridgerton Rokesby match, and in 1 it's a Rokesby and some lady match. But yeah, so I read in June, I read Because of Miss Bridgerton, which follows Billy Bridgerton, who is the oldest of the Bridgertons. She's kind of like a tomboy. She had 1 season in London and it was a complete disaster. So she's like past the classic marrying age, and she really just wants to like run Aubrey Hall and like her family's estate. She's obsessed with like all of that kind of stuff. And she was kind of grew up playing with the like 2 middle Rokesby children, Andrew and Edward. And then, but this book is her relationship with the oldest, who is going to be the Earl. So he's kind of a little more like serious because he has all this like, I have to be an Earl someday. And it's a little like enemies to lovers, but because they have the history of all of that, there's also like a little, it's all very playful. Like, I'm not a huge enemies to lovers fan, and this one like I liked, but it's definitely very slow. And I literally like, we're reading romance novels for the steam, and there's like, I think their wedding night is in the epilogue. Like, it's that slow. but I love her, and this was a good like complete like 3.5 stars. In July, I finally started to read books that weren't written by Julia Quinn. Groundbreaking. The first one was The Hop by Diana Clarke, which I've actually not heard anyone talk about. I don't even know how I found this. I think it was maybe a book talk recommendation, and it is basically tells the story of this young woman who is from New Zealand, and it kind of like it's given like an interview style, so she's like narrating her life story, and there's other bits and pieces from like other people in her life, her friends and all that kind of stuff. And she lost her mom at a young age, and they kind of had like a complicated, dysfunctional, but like very loving relationship. And she kind of always like, they were poor, so she kind of always like grew up like trying to figure out ways to make money. She kind of thrived under male attention because that was what her mom did, and she ends up moving to Nevada to work at like the Hop, I think it's called. Oh, like the Bunny Hop. It's like the Bunny Ranch. It's one of those like brothels in Vegas where it's legal. No, not Vegas, like the Nevada, but not Vegas, where it's legal to have a brothel. And so it's the story of that and all that stuff. It's like surprising sapphic romance in here that like sobbing over it, even though the way it's told is like in interview style. I would definitely look up like content warnings if you have any triggers around like sexual violence or parental death or drug use or anything like that. There's some pretty upsetting scenes around that, but because it's told interview style, nothing gets graphic. It's just like difficult sometimes. But yeah, 4 stars. Then I did go back to Julia Quinn, The Girl with the Make-Believe Husband. This is about like a 3.5-ish. Next I read This Is How You Lose the Time War. I'm sure everyone knows what this is about. I think it was big on BookTube, Book Talk, etc. a couple of years ago. It's basically like it calls it a twisting sapphic time travel fantasy love story that never stops surprising. And I would agree. I like read this so fast. I couldn't put it down. I was like crying. I mean, every book I've mentioned, every single one, I cried. There's no point in explaining it. Just read it. It's science fiction, but I'm not a huge science fiction person. It doesn't feel like science fiction. It's got fantasy elements to it. They present the world as fact, and I love that they're not like, we're not gonna explain how this works, how these people are time traveling, what they even are, if they're humans, if they're robots, if they're fairies. That's not important. All that matters is the emotions and the back and forth and the enemies to lovers to fated soulmates to, it's amazing. It's beautiful. Read it. If you have somehow, like me, missed this book, read it now. It'll take you 2 hours. Like, please. 5 stars. Easily. So, Acts of Violet by Margarita Montimore. Montimore, author of Una Out of Order, another book I've never heard of. Never heard anybody talk about this. I literally got like an Instagram ad for it, and I liked the cover and the name because purple is my favorite color. I don't know. It's basically like you read it, like the information about it, and you're like, oh, this is kind of a mystery. It's not. It's about family and sisters and all of that. It tells the story of 2 sisters, Violet and Sasha, and Violet is a magician, and one day in the middle of her magic act, she disappeared, and she was like a huge magician, like Chris Angel. Why was that the only magician I could think of? But like huge, like a celebrity whole thing. She's very like kind of mysterious and all this kind of stuff. Like everyone's her sister's just kind of been like, all right, you disappeared, you're dead, like this is messed up. It all takes place around the 10-year anniversary of Violet's disappearance, and it deals with a lot of like what Sasha is going through, and it's kind of like I think it's called like a mixed media, but not really. I don't know. I'm learning. I wasn't an English major. Have patience with my little brain. But yeah, it's a lot of, there's prose, and then there's emails, and then there's podcast transcripts and all of that stuff. And like, yeah, I would say don't go into it thinking that it's a mystery where you're going to get a satisfactory answer to where Violet is, because there's definitely some like leaps of faith you have to take. to like find out what happened. And there's almost like, is magic real? Is magic not real? And it's just so much about like the sisters and their relationship and how they grew up in the same house and had such different experiences, and how when you want to take care of your little sister, but you also, it's amazing. It was so good. It was probably a good like 4. I think I rated it, because Storygraph lets you do like the fractions. I believe I gave it a 4.25. So I was like, it's more than a 4. It's not a 5. So yeah, if you love kind of magical realism, a little mystery, sisters, magic. I actually like hate magic. I hate magicians, but I love real magic, and this plays with that. Back and forth, real book, historical romance, Julia Quinn, my girl. The other Miss Bridgerton, this was actually my favorite of the prequels up until the last one, which is actually my favorite, but that wasn't part of the 25 books I read. That was like book 27 or whatever. So I gave that one 5 stars, like 4 stars, which is basically like the most I would give a Bridgerton book that isn't When He Was Wicked. Like, that's the blueprint. If you're not When He Was Wicked. Next, I was like, I have so many books on my Audible that I haven't listened to, and I canceled my subscription like a year ago because I was just not listening to anything. But then I had to like use up all the credits that I had, so I bought some just random books that had been recommended, and I bought It Ends With Us by Colleen Hoover, and I had listened probably to like a chapter or 2 like a year ago, and because I think one of my friends read it and she's said she loved it, and she was like, it's kind of intense. So I looked up like the warning, so I knew about the like domestic abuse aspect of it. I was listening to the audiobook, and the narrator was good or everything, but it was so terrible. Okay, it's the story. I feel like at this point everyone has read it or will never read it. Everyone knows the Colleen Hoover controversy. She's very much a lover or hater writer. Like, I just didn't connect with her writing style, but basically it follows the story of this woman, Lily, and she's like in her 20s. I don't really remember how old she is, but yeah, she's in her 20s, and she opens like a flower shop. She lives in Boston. Like, the first scene of the book, which I did really like actually, was she's on this roof, and it's the day of her dad's funeral, and she meets this guy who I think is also having a bad day basically, and they just end up talking. He's like getting high, and they're just talking, and he's flirting, and he's kind of like, I don't do relationships, but like, you're hot. And she's like, I don't do one night stands, but you're hot. And then they like never see each other again. Bye. Except then she decides to finally follow her dreams and open like a flower shop, and she ends up hiring this random girl that it was very random. This other woman just comes in and is like, let me help you with your flower shop. I don't know. I liked her though. And she ends up being, which I knew the second this girl came in, this wasn't like a surprise, she ends up being, I cannot remember this man's name. I can't remember his name since it's a fake name. Ryle ends up being this random new friend she's made, like her brother. Like, they're whatever. And yeah, so they like get back in each other's lives, and it's like, oh my God, like he's like, oh my God, I will try a relationship for you or whatever eventually. But she's also at the same time, she's like, she got like a box of stuff from like her parents' house, and like she gets a box of like her old diaries, and every diary entry is written as a letter to Ellen DeGeneres. What more can I say? And they're also just like not written like diary entries, like it was stupid. Like, she's just telling us about these detailed stories of like when she was a teenager and she met this homeless kid named Atlas, another character I actually liked in the book.
Her whole relationship with Ryle, they get married, and then he's abusive, and like if you have been through anything abusive, I would straight say, like, do not read this. Like, it's not worth it.
Okay. I'm probably gonna end up editing a lot of that rant because it was just unnecessary. It ends with us, 1 star. Glad I know what the deal with Colleen Hoover is and know to never pick up another book by her. Then in August, I signed up for a Libby account, and I have been like audiobooks nonstop. I literally constantly, at all times, I have 10 audiobooks on hold. So the first one I read was Then She Was Gone by Lisa Jewell, which I gave 4 stars. It is basically a mystery thriller that is about this woman who, her daughter just disappeared one day when she was 15. She literally like went to school and never came home. And then most of the book takes place 10 years later. Finally find like her daughter's body, which is morbid, but and she finally decides to like try and like move on a little bit because there's like an element of closure, even though she doesn't know what happened to her. So she like starts dating this man, and she actually meets his daughter, and his daughter like reminds her a lot of her daughter Ellie. And like she's like, this is weird, the girl's name is Poppy, and like she's the cutest, like so amazing, and she's like, this is so weird. So she starts like kind of investigating, and like this man is very kind of cagey about his past and everything. But what I really love about the book is that you also get like flashbacks and like a different narrator, and at points, which I loved, and you get some things from Ellie's point of view, and it just is really, really well done. And I actually kind of figured out most of it. I figured out who kidnapped her like pretty quickly. Almost as soon as we met the character, I knew that they had done it. But everything with Poppy, I feel like I couldn't quite get a grip on. So that was really interesting. And the mother was like so compelling that I just wanted her to get answers, and I wanted her to be happy and everything about it was so satisfying. The narrator, her name was Helen Duff. She was incredible. She was doing like an Irish accent. Amazing. Like, listen to the audiobook of this one, even though the audiobook's the reason I can't remember the mom's name. But yeah, great, 4 stars. And I listened to the audiobook of The Four Winds by Kristin Hannah, which is a historical fiction novel. I assume the book is like massive because that was like 18 hours of my life. But tells the story of this woman named Elsa who like she grows up and it starts in like the 20s. Yeah, and she lives in the Texas Panhandle. Her family kind of sucks, and she ends up meeting this man. I believe his name's Rafe, but he's actually like a couple years younger than her, but they like sleep together, and she gets pregnant, and so they end up getting married, and they live on his family's farm, and like his family like completely like accepts her and are amazing. Like his parents are like the best. And yeah, it mostly follows her, and then as the book goes on, it switches back and forth between Elsa and her daughter Laredo. Yeah, Laredo is a town. Laredo is her daughter. Their point of views, and it takes place during the Great Depression when the Great Plains turn into the Dust Bowl. So they work on a farm and they lose everything. So when the Dust Bowl just keeps getting bad, they end up traveling out to California, and it just really follows all their stories about their highs and lows, and it just felt like nothing good could happen to this family. But I was so invested, like I wanted them to have happiness, and it just felt like it was impossible. And I listened to the audiobook, and it's narrated by Julie Whalen, who, my favorite. I literally, like on Libby, I like have all of her books that she's narrated like favorited because I'm like, I need these. Next, I read On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous by Vuong. Not sure about the pronunciation. I looked it up and I listened. but I'm trying my best. Ocean Vuong? It's not a memoir, but it's definitely got some like autobiographical elements. It is about this kid who, we don't know his name, it just goes by like Little Dog, and he's writing the whole book is written as like a letter to his mother, who actually can't read English, but it just really delves into the story of like immigrant families and the trauma and generational trauma and the Vietnam War. And it tells like, he tells his stories and his mom's stories and his grandmother's stories and all these stories and how they're all like woven in together. And like, he is a poet, so it just feels very poetic, and it's just absolutely amazing. It deals a lot with like sexuality. There's some drug use, there's some physical and emotional abuse. There's a lot of trauma, but it is absolutely worth reading. It will rip you apart and put you back together. And like, I think this is probably the easiest 5 stars I'd ever given a book. Then I actually listened to the audiobook, but I own a physical copy of Such a Fun Age by Kiley Reid, which is another one that I had been wanting to read for a while. It's a Reese's Book Club pick. And I'm actually glad that I read the audiobook because the narrator, Nicole Lewis, is amazing. And like, she really embodies, especially Amira's like vibe and like her friends and everything. I just felt like she narrated it better than like my brain could have almost. And yeah, so it's basically the story of this like young woman named Amira, who is kind of in her 20s, in that phase where like you don't really know what you want to do. She's working like part-time for like the Green Party. I believe it takes place in Philadelphia. She ends up doing part-time babysitting for this little girl, Briar, and her mother, Alix, is like the other point of view in the book. And basically it all kind of goes around this night where Amira is called late night out with her friends, called like, can you please come here and take Amira, like we've had a disaster at the house, like we just need this toddler out of the house. So she goes and she takes her and she just walks her over to the nice little Whole Foods-esque grocery store around the corner, and basically some random bystander like contacts store security and is like, this Black woman stole this little white child. And it really just explores all of that, and like everything's fine, like she doesn't get arrested or anything, but like it just explores like the trauma of that. It explores like racism, but in this way where it's really talking about like how sometimes the people who try hardest to not be racist can actually be doing the most like microaggression, messed up stuff. And like Alix's identity is so wrapped up in this idea of like being almost like a white savior to this girl who she is not even that much younger than her, maybe 10 years, like who she feels like she needs to like save, but like save from what? She's happy, she's 24 and a little lost, like she'll be okay. But it's so good. The climax of the book is like amazing. So good. 4 stars. My battery just died, so this might look different. Probably my sign to like wrap things up and talk a little faster. But yeah, so then I read The Midnight Library. I actually listened to the audiobook, which was narrated by Carey Mulligan, which I didn't love her narration, but it's fine. I gave it like a 4.5, and I might have given it a 5 if I had read it myself. I don't know how much the narration kind of interfered with my opinion of it, but basically I feel like this is a book that has kind of very like polarizing reviews. Like you either love it or you hate it, and I definitely lean more towards love. It tells the story of this woman, Nora, who like decides, she's like 35 years old, and she decides to take her own life and ends up in the Midnight Library, which is kind of suspended in time, almost like a purgatory situation. But she basically, there's all these books, and there's this librarian who tells her like, you can go into the books and these are all the different potential lives you could have had if you just made one choice different. And she is filled with so much regret about all these things, like, oh, why did I quit swimming? Why did I break up with this guy? Why did I do all of this? She blames herself for the fact that like her cat just died, and that was so upsetting. All this kind of stuff. So she is excited about this idea, and the idea is that like you can go into these worlds, and when you feel like satisfied and safe and like you're not wondering what else is there, you'll stay there and you can live this life that you are so obsessed with this idea that you should have had. And I think a lot of people feel that it's very preachy and heavy-handed and everything, and as someone who has struggled with a lot of mental health things and has a lot of mental health history in her family, like I definitely can be critical about some portrayals of it, but I think that this one did amazing. And maybe it's because I'm through the worst of it. I'm in therapy and very happy, like kind of annoyingly happy. Like, so I can see the things that if you were depressed would feel like meaningless platitudes. To me, they are true, because I'm like, yeah, like that is true, and that's how you get through it, and that's how I view my life now that I'm happy. But yeah, I don't know if I'd necessarily recommend this book to someone who is going through a depressive episode. But if you are coming out of a depressive episode or have dealt with that in the past or love people who have struggled, I would definitely recommend it. It has, obviously, there's some trigger warnings. For me personally, the most upsetting was her cat died, but it actually ended up being like kind of a beautiful thing. But yeah, I cried like a baby through so much of this book. So I thought it was great. In September, I read slightly less books. I listened to the audiobook, The Great Alone by Kristin Hannah, which is like a 5-star read to me, also not narrated by Julie Whalen. And that one is another historical fiction. It follows the story of Lenny and her parents, and they her dad is like takes place in the 70s. Her dad is like a Vietnam vet, and he comes home like very traumatized, and basically the family is like, oh, like everything will be fixed if we move to Alaska, the middle of nowhere. His friend who died in Vietnam like left him his property in Alaska, so they moved there, and it's all about like the community there and the people they meet, and following Lenny, who's like, she's like 13 at the beginning of the book, and it follows her. And there's a lot of, her father is so traumatized that their relationship with her mother is abusive and toxic and not great and upsetting and difficult to watch, but not in a way that felt gratuitous. It's very like real and feels like it's like there for a reason, not like the point. And yeah, it's just really good. The characters are so interesting. The location is amazing. It makes me want to go to Alaska. And yeah, it just broke me and then built me back up. Like there's like a happy ending almost, which as you're reading the book, you're like, there's no way there's gonna be a happy ending. This is misery. But there's a happy ending, and I loved it. 5 stars. Next, if I can get through this before my battery dies again, I read the Inheritance Games trilogy, like blasted through this. Was like, oh, I'm just gonna read one and then I'll wait. No, I went to the Barnes & Noble and got the next 2 immediately. Actually, this one's Target sticker. Love it. It follows the story of Avery, who's like a 17-year-old girl who she basically one day finds out she's the sole inheritor basically of this billionaire she's never met. So she goes to this house, the Hawthorne house in Texas, and like the will gets read out. She meets all these like the characters, his grandchildren. He's like 4 grandsons, and Nash, Grayson, Jameson, and Xander, and like they're all so different and so great. And it's kind of like a mystery. There's like puzzle elements. It's a little Knives Out, a little Nancy Drew. It's so much fun. And obviously there's like a love triangle element, and all of that. I just had so much fun. Like, I think a lot of people, the first one is their favorite, but for me, the second one is my favorite because I shipped the right thing, which, I mean, sounds bad. Like, you can't control which boy you like, but I just felt like it was obvious from book one that the boy who was Endgame was gonna be Endgame. But yeah, the puzzles were so much fun. This one has a lot of family stuff where you're learning about her family. You learn a lot about her mom, which I think is cool because her mom dies before the beginning of the book. And yeah, it's just so much fun. The characters are so interesting. It was a young adult book, which I don't read a lot of, but it makes me want to. I just really had a great time. I can't believe there's more coming. I think I didn't rate these on Storygraph, I don't think, because I couldn't really figure it out. Probably 4.5. I don't know. I would definitely recommend them if you're into young adult kind of mystery things. Yeah, it's fun. It's like, they're not life-changing, but I think they're really, really good. The 25th book, I think, happened to be a great book. I listened to the audiobook of The Dream House by Carmen Maria Machado, which is like a memoir, and the audiobook was read by the author, which I always love. And it's basically it's memoir told kind of in these short stories and little vignettes. Basically tells Carmen's story of when she was in her early 20s and was in an abusive relationship with her girlfriend. Like, her girlfriend was abusive. I don't know why that was hard to say, but yeah, there's a lot of moments that are very obviously traumatizing and upsetting, and I was crying for her. And then there are moments that are lighter or funnier or just very, like, make you think, like, that she's able to, one story is about this like really awful fight they got into, and then the next one draws all these parallels to this episode of Star Trek. Yeah, I think it's a really important part of kind of the queer canon that everyone should read, whether you're gay or straight or whatever. But yeah, it's really, really good. 5 stars, love it. I have so many of her other books on my TBR now. But yeah, this was a very long video, gonna be difficult to edit, but I had fun talking about books, and it's like almost like my mid-year freakout tag or yearly wrap up. Yeah, 25 books, hit my reading goal. So proud of myself. Can't wait to make more reading goals and read more books. Let me know if you read any of these books, or if you have any books that you think I should put on my next reading goal list. And thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in my next one. Like, subscribe, let's hang out more.